So now I teach discus throwing, javelin throwing, and all the rest, that you are a bag of rubber bands.
Mm.
And what we want to do for elite performance is get you into a place where at one moment we stretch all those rubber bands. And then the more important thing is we release it. Crappy throwers, crappy jumpers, crappy hurdlers try to add a little more when it's too late.
That was Dan John, and you're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast. Thanks for being here. Dan John is a man who needs very little introduction. He is a best-selling author in the field of strength training and fitness. He is a coach and athlete with decades of experience, and Dan is well known for his ability to transfer complex material into actionable wisdom. Dan simplifies the process of performance, but reminds us that it might be simple, but it's not easy. And just that concept is one that's taken me years, if not decades, to learn, and I'm still learning it. On the show today, Dan will be talking about some important concepts that any coach or athlete needs to routinely visit and revisit within their process, one of which will be the power of compression or the power of less, and how when we compress things, it will later expand. And we'll be talking about this on the level of track season and the weather in Utah, but also in the process of training itself, both on the level of exercise selection and then how we actually coach sports skills. Dan will also be talking about the nuts and bolts of 3P's of muscle action, specifically that of snapacity, or snapping plus capacity, and how that really represents the core function of explosive athleticism. This and much more on the show today. Again, it's always awesome talking with Dan, and I'm really happy he was able to make it again as a guest on this podcast. Let's get to episode 359. Dan, it's awesome to have you back on the show, man. I know you were just at a track meet the other day, coaching track again. What's been going on for track season? I'm always excited to catch up with you there.
Okay, well, it's been brutal here in the West, because of the weather, the snowstorms. So it's just been weird because we haven't had any meets. I mean, there's been days you couldn't even pull out of your driveway, much less, throw the discus. So, and in the last 2 weeks, all of a sudden it's just, it feels like yesterday. So yesterday at this meet, it was hard summer weather. I mean, it was hot, and it's kind of nice because I think the compression of the season has actually helped. So we're having track meets on, it seems like Saturday, Wednesday. So my shot putter had a personal record, javelin thrower had a personal record, and we had a really nice day. Last weekend, my discus thrower added 10 feet to her best, won the conference. My javelin thrower is the top 3 thrower in the nation right now, out of nowhere. But it's nice. We often say, like one of the things we talk about, especially in Catholic education, about the uniforms. We often say what you compress expands. So when you tell an artist, okay, you got to paint this war scene in an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and it has to share all the horrors of a bombing civilians, makes for, Pablo Picasso, runs and does, something amazing with that. So what you compress expands. So that's one of the lessons I've kind of learned. Really, as a coach, it's a wonderful thing. In the discus, we have a ring. You're bounded by the ring, and then you're bounded by the sector. What you compress expands, and I think that is probably one of the greatest truisms of my coaching career. If I go into your gym and eliminate 5, 6, 9/10 of the equipment, then I find out how good of a strength coach you are. If I say, you got 52 boys to train, you got 1 barbell and 4 off-weight dumbbells, you got to coach them. Well, let's see how you do, That's why I like track and field so much. And that's why I think most people hate it, because it's like, I hate to say it, 100 meters is pretty simple. I'm going to say go. And then whoever gets that line about 100 meters from here wins, And boy, I tell you, it's funny to watch how much parents push back on track and field. I've had parents say, well, what if Billy went to a camp? Well, no, he still wouldn't be any good as a sprinter. No offense, mom and dad, but you're you're about 70% of the problem with his speed. Your DNA isn't world-class DNA. So what you compress expands. And so what's nice about this harsh winter we had is it's been just a glorious couple of weeks. I wouldn't say it's been a great track season, but the last few weeks have been wonderful. And there's so many life lessons in what I think what I just said, and training lessons, because we've been faced with a situation where, and the NC2A decided to have these new rules about, so NC2A has done everything they can to destroy track and field. And now they've made it even harder. You have to have 14 athletes compete. And I don't remember the exact number of meets. So you have to have 14 female athletes compete in a number of meets to allow your one athlete going to nationals to compete at nationals. So they've ruined the scholarship structure. They made it a nightmare to run track meets, and now they make it even harder. So all the track coaches, okay, here's your rule. And now we're having these track meets all the time. And it's actually been glorious. Yesterday, the only event going on at the track at the end was the discus. And there was this massive crowd around the discus ring.
Oh, it's always the best. Always the best.
It was delightful. And the other thing I've noticed about this year's track season because of this is that we'll go to track meets and you'll only see 2 uniforms in a race. You'll see 2 schools in a race. And it's been fun. It's like the old dual meets when I was growing up. So it's been wonderful. Okay, I went on too long. Sorry.
No, it's good. You had a lot of good stuff in there. I was going to say with the discus too, for some reason coaching in indoor in Wisconsin, which, yeah, speaking of spring outdoor track seasons, they get ruined, at least. It's not ruined. And I actually had something to say with that as well. But indoor, it seemed like triple jump was always the last event for whatever reason. And then people would just pack the runway. And in hindsight, it reminds me of Tony Holler talks about the Gauntlet 40s, where people line the track for their running the 40-yard dash. But it was like that at the end meet for the triple jump. People would just come over, hang out, clap for each athlete, going down the runway. And it made it really exciting. And for like that moment in time, like that is the main stage for this thing that is so obscure to mainstream, anything with sports. Like, what is the triple jump? Like, even in my early track days, I had no idea. And that was always such a special feeling at the end of the meets there. I was going to say something you said. I just think that, and you had mentioned it applies to so many things in life, is with the what you compress expands is, yeah, being from Wisconsin and just having that, like, you'd have these weeks of just snow, cold. And then when it is finally warm out, it is so good. And I think it does fit with, like you said, what happens when we've talked about this on previous podcasts, eliminate things from the weight room. What if you only had these 2 pieces of equipment? And I think it even fits in with like fasting and feasting. Like when you fast, the food is so good. And then at the end of the fast, you're like, in some ways, I always think, well, I can't imagine not having done that fast, because then I would just always have what I've always had. And I wouldn't just feel how good it is, to have a good meal again. You get that feeling too with track season. It's like, God, it's so cold out. Like, this sucks. And then, you got to make the best of it. I'll do the ice tub actually doing the ice tub in the winter made the cold a lot better. But when it finally gets warm, it's just like, this is so good. And you almost couldn't imagine it being the same. If it was always warm, it just wouldn't be the same thing. And yeah, we've both been in California, so I know how glorious it is for it to be nice pretty much all year. But there is something about that fast feast cycle too, that like having lack and then having something, and even injury too, even being hurt, but by the
what
time,
a gift. Yeah. Stu McGill called his book The Gift of Injury.
Yeah.
I can remember I lost a quarterback one time for a week. It wasn't a terrible injury, but he needed to heal. So good. And I asked him, I said, here's your homework assignment. Of course, I always give homework assignments because that's, I'm an old geezer. And I said, I want you to write a 1-page essay about what you learned from this week of just watching. And it was interesting because one of the first things he told me was, you're always getting on us to work hard, and we think we are. But now that I stand here, I realize that we don't. And he was such a better quarterback by not playing for a week and having to stand there next to me in his school uniform, by the way, in his school uniform, standing next to me. And he goes, and we then had a long conversation after. He goes, I was watching them and they were dogging, they were dogging at practice. There was no hustle. There was no focus. You turn your back and they're screwing around. And And it was great. So sometimes taking the things away is what makes you great. I have a friend who used to explain to the parents why uniforms were so important, not just in the classroom, but on the field of play, is because we can't tell as coaches and athletes and teachers whether the kid's wealthy, poor, anything. The only thing that, if we're all in the same uniform, the only thing that shines out in the classroom is your intellect versus, the hat you're wearing or the vampire or the goth or the whatever, The only thing that shines in my classroom in that scenario is your intellect. And I got to tell you, man, it's just like being at a track meet. The only thing that shines when you leave the discus ring is your effort, not the uniform you're in. So it is a great life lesson, hated by most people, by the way.
Yeah. It's always easier, especially as we keep pushing forward in the information age. The term time is speeding up with all the information cross connecting, and it's so much easier just to do more. And I was reading through the Omni-Book you just released, the Easy Strength Omni-Book, and I'm continually reminded as I read through it, especially within the high neural effort type lifts, that the key is consistency and leaving something on the table, not straining towards your goal. And I think it's so easy now to just do more, to strain more, put more in, try more. But the wisdom is knowing when to do less. And then also there's a different type of working hard in removing yourself. Especially I think of that in fasting as well. Like in fasting, removing yourself from food, that you're working hard, but it's a different kind of hard work, if that makes sense. And I think sometimes that logic can almost be applied over into training as well on some level. And I think sometimes when I have an injury tweak or something like that, and I have to go to ISO, I just go to body weight stuff. ISO holds for a week. I'm like, and I always, every single time think it's so good I'm doing this right now. I am so happy that my body has this break to go back to these rudimentary focus, concentration basics here. And you could work hard at those. It's body weight, in that sense, and appreciate that. So I feel like I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but I'm trying to also tie this all together in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and one of the things we're going to talk about today is things like Snapacity and stuff like that. But it's the Snapacity, gentle listener, is the word snap forced together with the words work capacity. Snap capacity, the ability to snap over and over and over and over again. But what I don't think many coaches realize is that every resource you're working with a human body is finite. And it is much easier to do more than to do enough. Doing more is one of the easiest things you can ever do. Enough is really a difficult thing in every field I know. I mean, I work with this friend of mine he was a carpenter for a long time. So he has the ability to take the hammer and one shot the nail into the wood. Instead of going tap, 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 he can go bam, bam. And the nail goes all the way through. And he goes, what's weird about it is if you hit it too hard, it's actually worse. It's got to be the right amount of effort for the nail to go right into the wood on one shot. He goes, it's the right amount of effort. And I can remember just sitting there going, you just explained track and field, football, and every sport I've ever done in my life. You can kick the ball as a soccer football player as hard as you feel like right in front of the open net. But you can also score by just tapping it in front of an open net. The number of points is 1, unless you hit it so hard you miss the net entirely. So that there's that obvious lesson, and most people miss it. But and let me just talk about that real quick. So I see my job as a strength coach, and my basic job is what I call the 3P's. Okay, the 3P's, and so we're not videoing this, right? So I'll have to. So gentle listener, you're going to have to pretend you see so I have my upright middle finger there. That's the three P's. And the first P is point. And I take my middle finger, my index finger, and I point it straight up. And what I do is I push it from every different direction. And that's the first job of the muscles. And so that you can call that planking. If I'm standing up, you can call it being rigid. The word I use in the weight room is stay tall. As a thrower, I want to be tall on my throw. As a runner, I want to be tall. As a jumper, I want to be tall. So the first job of the muscle system is to, at least in the athletic world, is to be tall, is to be able to withstand the forces, the side to side forces. When I teach planks, I use the push-up position plank a lot, but I also have one called the vertical plank. That's where you have a kind of a stretchy band coming down from the ceiling, and you're standing up and you grab it at arm's length and you pull down and you just resist. Another one is you have the stretchy band coming from a pole sideways, hands are in front of you, and you just simply resist. Suitcase carries, that's when you walk with a heavy weight in just one hand to teach your body to resist bending under movement. So for me, the very first thing we teach, and I think what many people miss, is this is what I still think is the off season, early preseason. Now I know we're not supposed to use terms like that anymore. Now we're using those BS made up Soviet terms that, trust me, they never used either. It's okay to use it, but when I see this is a GPP, GSP program, I'm always just rolling my eyes. It's like, don't try so hard. Just say it's preseason. I used to love preseason, in season, off season. I still love that. It's just like, everyone goes, yeah, I get what you're saying. But if I say GSP, it's like, what? But throughout the year, you need to constantly come back and train the point system, that the system of being rigid, staying tall, fighting the forces that are trying to twist you, move you, turn you, tilt you. And then the second thing a muscle can do is basically poke. Okay. And that's what you do when you're typing. Okay. When you're typing, you tell your finger. It's funny. I've been typing so long, I can't tell you where the keys are on the keyboard, but my fingers know exactly where they are. So I stopped worrying about it. I was about to say press, and I couldn't remember what I was about to say, and I was using my right index finger. I was pressing the keyboard, press, poke, same thing. And I couldn't tell you what it was. It is J. It's J. Okay. But, I know this is A because that was the hardest one to teach. So most training programs end up focusing on this middle one here. This would be the bench press, the row, the squat, the deadlift. That's when your body is taking a load and it goes from here to here, here to here, here to here. And it's got great value. There's nothing wrong with push-pull hinge squat. There is nothing wrong with it. In fact, that's how you build an engine. That's how you build an athlete that's going to knock down the opponent. But it's the third P is the one that makes for elite performance. So the 3Ps, and now it's time for the Dan John crappy sense of humor time. So it's point, poke, or prod, whatever. Let's go. Which one do you want to use? Which one?
Poke. We'll go with the first, the anchor. So poke's fine.
Okay. So point, poke, and the third P is snap. Okay. And really it's when if you can't, but usually I teach it in 3 different ways. The first one is I take the finger and I pull it back. And if you just let go, it goes. But of course, then you can also just snap your fingers, which is, by the way, snapping your fingers, your finger that makes that noise is moving far faster than you could ever consciously make that noise. Trying to make a snapping sound by doing the poke method, it doesn't really make much noise. So snap is what I'm trying to get my athletes to learn how to do. I got away years ago, a long time ago, from teaching the fact that there's 600 muscles in the body. Now I teach there's one muscle with 600 kind of subdivisions. Okay. And that all those muscles can do is, the best thing they can do is shrink. So now I teach discus throwing, javelin throwing, and all the rest, that you are a bag of rubber bands. And what we want to do for elite performance is get you into a place where at one moment we stretch all those rubber bands. And then the more important thing is we release it. Crappy throwers, crappy jumpers, crappy hurdlers try to add a little more when it's too late.
100%.
you'll see that. I know you're more into you're more into jumping and sprinting, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and there's nothing with that.
Yeah, I threw javelin though, coached as well though, so I have that little link in there.
Well, okay. Well, javelin throwing is an absolute rubber band event, right?
Yeah, it's some people. I know some throwing circles they would shun the javelin.
Well, I was going to, but then I was trying to be kind. Yeah. So for those you don't know, javelin throwers are kind of the oddballs of the throws world.
I get it.
We include them begrudgingly, okay? But it is probably the only throwing event you can be born to do. There are people who are just born with cannons, but there's a good example. I mean, I will watch a young thrower try to tricep extend a javelin. You'll see them, or you'll hear the phrase, "Yeah, I got to work this muscle because that'll help me throw the javelin far." And I'm like, boy, you are so clueless about what makes the javelin go far. What makes the javelin go far is this ability to stay relaxed as you aggressively attack with your legs, and then you turn your body into a bow and arrow. Here's the key to the bow and arrow, folks. When you pull back the nock, when you pull back the arrow where the feathers are, you don't push the arrow forward, you let it go. Elite performance is letting it go. It's letting the muscles snap. And so for me, a good strength training program, and this needs to float through the year, you should never get away as an elite performer from coming back. And there's always room in a program, even the week of the biggest meet of your life or whatever you got going on, to make sure you remind yourself how to plank and stay tall. Because what happens sometimes at the end of the season, and you can see it in the throwing events, is that the athletes try so hard, they lean away from the implement, shortening the radius. Well, the way I work on that in the gym, I don't do flies. I had this thrower, God bless her. Her boyfriend was a personal trainer, so he must have really known what he was talking about. So he had her doing tricep extensions as a shot putter. And I got to tell you, folks, get a chance, pick up a 16-pound shot put and see how far you can skull crush that thing. Don't do it because the ends of your elbow will come off. So there is, late in the season, you need to remind yourself that the implements go around the axis. The implements go around the axis. And the firmer the axis is, the farther the implement goes. So there is a need, even late in the season, to keep coming back to those planks. And there is a need throughout an entire training year, entire training decade, to do the basics of push, pull, hinge, squat, loaded carry too, just to build the big engine to feel strong. But superior performance comes from snapping. But you have to have those first two built in to build upon it, to the snap. So it's the 3P's of performance is what I call it: point, prod, poke, snap. And if you find yourself in a situation where, any time of year, the athlete all of a sudden seems to be just kind of flailing very often, and like you said, the gift of injury, sometimes that's why an injury is so good, is because we have to get off the track, we have to get off the court, we have to get off the field, and we have to go against the wall and do these very slow, almost meditative movements. And very often, we fix that injury, but we also fix the system to remind ourselves how much more powerful we are when we do things at the right speed, at the right time, when things are right. In training, enough is enough. In performance, getting it right is the most important thing.
I wanted to take a quick minute to tell you about my story with our sponsor, Lost Empire Herbs. Several years ago, I had strongman and mental training expert Logan Christopher on the show, and in the interview, I realized that Logan, in addition to deadlifting over 500 pounds and ripping phone books in half, also was the founder of an herbalism company. Long story short, I ended up ordering the Phoenix formula, one of their flagship products, and in taking that, I noticed increased energy and a decreased reliance on coffee, which honestly, I was kind of expecting that. But what I didn't expect is after a few weeks, I noticed my weight room numbers had increased substantially. And the Phoenix formula also led me to getting Shilajit resin, which is found in the Phoenix formula and recommended by a lot of strength coaches, as well as other Lost Empire Herbs products. I've been using Lost Empire Herbs ever since, and I have sponsors of the show that I believe in, that I use, and that I want to share with you. So if you want to check them out, head to lostempireherbs.com/justfly for 15% off my favorite Lost Empire Herbs products. You get a 365-day money-back guarantee. I really enjoy having Lost Empire Herbs as a sponsor of this show, and I hope you get a chance to check out what they have to offer. Let's get back to the podcast. Yeah, I completely agree. I think with the just enough to, even that the hammer analogy, I love that, just because I think so often it's very easy on a very rudimentary level just to think, well, just if you're going to sprint, just push as hard as you can. If you're going to throw, just move your arm as hard as you can. And the fact of the matter is, when you actually do that, it just doesn't work. But I think the throws are the easiest way to find that out instantly, because you get instant feedback. Like a sprint, if you don't have the timing system out, you might not know. Your coach might be like, "Oh, that looked good," but throws, it's
that looked good, yeah.
Yeah. But the throws, you do it, and that didn't go very far. What was wrong, or what out of the sector? Like you get instant. Trying as hard as I can didn't work, and so now I have instant feedback. Okay, let's try something else here. I love those 3P's too. I was thinking about it. Jay Schrader's a coach who I've had a lot of podcasts with his ideas in mind, and it's funny.
He's still around. Oh yeah, sure, okay, yeah.
Just a little bit south of you, I think, in Arizona there. But he, I think his system was something like very similar, but in a little, just maybe a different perspective. But it was like starting with isos. The isos were the base, so that's like your position or the point. Like, and a lot of that was with the long. Like if I did an iso lunge, it would be with a long spine, and then the strength, and then the ability to contract, relax. Like it's almost like this triad that's like written in time of training. And I think,
there's nothing new about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always amazed when people think that things like isometrics are, have you tried this? Yes, from the cutting edge research of the 1930s. Yes. Dan, you hear about vitamin D? Yes, from the cutting edge research from the 1940s. Yes, I have. Yeah. There's really the problem, Joel, is it's real hard to make money selling this. I really push sleep. I really push fasting. I push drinking water. I push protein and veggies. Real hard to make money pushing that stuff. Real hard. It's just not sexy. And it's interesting. That's why I like working with special operations guys, is because generally when they come to me, they're at a place where they know that simple is best. Major League Baseball, and I love the phrase, there's a sign in my gym given to me by an all-star baseball player. Really, I mean, a very big, famous name. This is a no eyewash zone is the sign on my gym wall. In Major League Baseball, that means this is no bullshit. The eyewash is bullshit. And the thing is, eyewash sells. Eyewash sells. And this stuff, I tell you, doesn't. I mean, it doesn't sell.
Yeah.
Easy strength doesn't sell. And yet, if you go back and look at training programs from the 50s, 60s, and in my workshop, I have Arnold's workouts that he recommends. It's easy strength. Franco's workouts, it's easy strength. Bosco, easy strength. Miles Callum, the first book I ever really got, the book that changed my life right there. Right next to it's the Sears manual, the Sears barbell workout. The first workout I ever did in 1965. It's easy strength. It's all simple stuff. All that stuff works. The application on the field of play, now that's different. And we've got to do, some other things. Basically, we got to get you into that isometric position. Basically, we got to then do, some other things and then later teach the snap of it. And that's coaching right there. I just gave you a 10-year program right there,
Yeah.
Get strong and get first. Always get strong tall. Get strong as you can, push against you in all these different directions, then move off, challenge those positions, push against you, then add load, and then work on snap. And that's it. And then you have to blend it. You have to blend it throughout a year in different ways, but you just keep coming back to the same darn things. Yeah.
Yeah. I like, forget if it was I think it was like a Joseph Campbell quote about like the country that's lost its myth. or something like that. That being a poor thing, we've like lost at least the archetypical grounding of where we came from. And maybe you probably know more. I'm like, I think I know this quote. But
as you walk into my house, the green man is an important. I don't want to go through all the last 5 years. My life has not been great the last 5 years. We'll just stop there. But when you walk into my house, there's a wall statue. I think they're called sconces sometimes of the green man, is because the green man has become very important to me in the last few years because I've had to reinvent myself so many times. I had basically, I was basically to a place where there was no, the business, everything was basically, my finances were zero. Okay. Basically it was worse than that because, it was work. And I just rebuilt the business in 2 years. Boom. No problems at all. It pretended like it never happened before. A couple of years back, I had a total hip replacement. You get to your place with a total hip replacement where you suddenly go from being I was not doing my best, but you go from being this elite athlete. In the past, I spent 51 years building up this engine. My best years as a discus thrower were my late 40s. 47 was my best year by far. I got to 51, and then all the wheels came off. I've spent the last 14 years doing the green man, died and reborn as a human person. And I feel better now than probably since my teenage years, which is kind of an interesting thing. So I agree with you when you talk about anytime you talk about mythos, as we say in my other field. Mythos are those stories that are true, but not necessarily true. It's those, it shouldn't surprise you that Harry Potter doesn't have parents because Tarzan didn't, Batman, Superman didn't. Jesus of Nazareth, there's a question there. Moses, King Arthur, Spider-Man, it is a mythos. It is, and Carl Jung said that the reason we have that is the orphan is someone that the entire community can adopt. So there's always truths in myths that are just a little bit different than what you expect. And by the way, I mentioned Jesus of Nazareth. He's also the green man. He died and was replanted and, rose again, from our Easter people. Yeah. So I appreciate when you bring up myths. And that's one of the reasons I think I do talk weirdly. I talk to my athletes about stories like that too. It's funny you mentioned that. I think it's when my athletes stumble at the end of the season, have a bad day, I quote Man of La Mancha, Don Quixote, to them. For each time you fall, you shall rise again, and woe to the wicked. And I also quote Chumbawamba. You get knocked down, get back up again.
A more modern myth, but probably recycled throughout history. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and then the Rocky in one of the Rocky movies, when he's talking to his son, life's going to knock you down, and you got to get back up. I mean, these just are reoccurring themes. And the nice thing about being an athlete who takes it serious in a decades approach is you're going to get knocked down. And when you look back over your career, when I was at the Olympic Training Center, the guy was really interested in me. And I've said this in a couple of my books about, they asked us to do an assignment, right? You write down the top 10 bests of your athletic career and the top 10 worsts. And it's funny, when you do the 10 bests, everyone writes like this. Oh, you can't see me, gentle listener, but I have a big smile on my face, and I'm showing the world how great I am. When you write down your worst, everyone huddles over the piece of paper and hides it. And Jim walked over to me and he said, "Oh, I want you to look at this a little closer." And he took his finger and he goes, he pointed to my worst list and he goes, "What happened after that worst?" "Oh, that's the best. That's the best of my," and then go number 2, worst. "Oh, it was number 2 best in my life." All my worsts led to all my bests. So there is for me now, your mileage may vary, but everything in my life that I thought was the worst thing ever, when I breathed out and took some time, it turned out to be the best thing ever. Now, obviously, in the last few years, I've had a number of tragedies in my life. And one of the things that kept me going, and I hope you don't mind this segue, because I think this segue is really important. The lessons my life has told me is that when you find tragedy, go through it, breathe out, because something even better is coming around the corner. And, we all talked about how horrible it was a few weeks back with all the storms of the season. But since we've had to compress meets, basically we're barely training in the last few weeks because, train all you want, but you have a meet in 2 days. So I don't know how, if I was working with my sprinter course, I don't work with sprinters anymore, but our workouts would be show up, loosen up, go home, because, every couple of days the gun goes off and fully automatic timing happens. I know whether you're running fast or not, because all those officials with those times are going to flash up on this scoreboard, and we'll know if you ran fast or not. I don't have to. How did that feel? We'll know how that felt. So it's kind of as tough as it's been. The golden lining of this season is that we have these compressed track meets where you don't even have time really to think about your technique, because you're already at a track meet and you have to have meet mind on. Oh, meet mind. MEET versus MEAT. I ask my athletes sometimes, do you have meet mind or do you have meat mind? And we all laugh. Meat mind is when you try to get in the way of your muscles. MEET mind is when you let the system just happen. You let the throw just happen. You let the nervous system and those 600 muscles, and you don't walk into the middle of a symphony and go, "Hey, more snare drum." you don't riff in the middle of a Mozart, right? And now all the and then now David is going to bang the drums a little bit. You don't do that, in the middle of Rhapsody of Blue. All of a sudden, the lead violinist doesn't stand up and start jamming. You let it go and you stick with it. I think of symphonies as the way you throw a discus. Lots and lots and lots and lots of individual pieces, lots and lots of time working on them. You blend them, you blend them, you blend them, and then we all stick together on the same page for a long time. To me, that's elite performance.
Yeah.
And it's meat mind, MEET versus MEAT. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember this was back in my 20s. I remember watching throwers warm up at indoor track meets, and when they'll do like skips to warm up sometimes. And a lot of times the thrower skips are very different than the jumper skips, because the throwers, at least I was watching, because they would really like drive their arm hard. Like everything was like, you could say volitional or conscious muscling effort to, and I wish I would have known more about the throws back then. I would have been like, all right, do these guys try to muscle their throws versus, and so that's actually one of the first things I have any athlete do when they start in the gym is just, hey, just skip. And I don't say anything. I just say, I just want to watch you skip, and let's see how you solve that problem. Like maybe you're going to do what a coach told you at some point. Oh, I'm supposed to drive my knee hard and lift my arm versus, or maybe you're just relaxed and using energy and things like that.
No, you're right, because it's funny. We have a drill where we throw as far as we can, and then we take off, about 80%, and have them try to throw as easy as you can. So you threw 180, we bring it back to 160, okay, ish, okay, just ish numbers, okay, 55 meters to 50, okay, and it's weird to have the athlete trying to throw who's just through 55 meters. Trying to throw, it's weird. It's so easy to throw that throw. Well, and what happens is it quickly creeps up to 51, 52, 53, 54, very often 56, 57. They actually throw farther, trying not to throw hard at all. And they get very frustrated with that drill. Another drill I do is I put up their last year's record. And remember how hard you threw that last year? Yeah, man, I really went for it. It was the conference meet. I really needed this big throw. And now what do you think of that throw? Oh, so bad. I'm so much better now. Okay. that's to me but that's what we're trying. I think we're saying the same thing. Once you start moving, once you start becoming better, more elite, whatever you want to say, all that extraneous effort and movement starts to get washed away.
Mm-hmm.
Very much. There's a great Japanese hammer thrower, Koji, who's actually good friends with my brother Gary, which cracks me up. My brother Gary is a Vietnam vet. He's deaf, who throws the hammer, and he's 73. And he and Koji train together at Moffat all the time. And they're actually, I've been told by others, it's fun to watch. My brother can't hear, and Koji doesn't speak English as well, so it doesn't really matter. And the two of them just throw together for a long time. Kind of like two dogs, just kind of playing, throwing, and having fun. Koji really specializes in getting rid of all the excessive movements. In fact, his whole training system is to wash it free of all the excess. And the quieter a hammer thrower can keep his, well, I call it chin, sternum, and zipper. The quieter those movements get, the more the ball has a chance to extend farther and farther away, making the hammer go farther. But if you try to hit it, you get your chin ahead, or you break the flow of the rotation, you feel like you threw it harder, but it doesn't go nearly as far. And that is a life lesson.
Yeah.
That's a life lesson, isn't it?
Yeah. That's one thing I find, it, like you mentioned, all the way back to mentioning like the javelin athlete who they didn't do it. They didn't set it up right. And so they compensate by a little extra arm action at the end and a little extra push off the back foot that's not supposed to be doing that. And a lot of where I've gone, at least let's just say in sprinting and jumping, is like with Koji. I remember the Koji videos. He's got like the bar, like with the like almost like these bamboo bands on it. It shakes, and he's like just smoothly,
we call it Koji squats. Yeah,
smoothly going through, no waste. He's that is such to me the art form of that. Just feeling the movement and reducing or eliminating the excess, like you said. And for me, I've actually gone, like in sprinting, it's very easy to say, well, really get your knees up. But when you do that, if you force it, if you're not going fast enough to earn that and you force it, that's an easy way to throw excess in the system that you don't have to deal with. And I see that even in jumping and skipping and like bounding, and people who actually don't have that impulse. And so they make up for by more extra arms and more extra knees. And again, they might get a little further than they were, but I'm always like, well, how can I start with less? Like the Samburu jump, the tribe where they're just bouncing and they have their it's like not a shawl, it's like a blanket around them, so their arms are actually tied against their body, and they can't even use their arms in this jump, but they're pogoing up and down. And I'm like, well, let's start there. Let's start without using your arms. Let's start with less and get really good at that, and then we'll let you bring these in. And I've gone the same way with sprinting, even starting with low knees. Like, you don't get this now. Let's be really efficient without the ability to. Anyways, I'm kind of going off on a rabbit trail, but
No, you're not at all.
That's
what
where
you're doing
I've
is
gone.
You're compressing.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
And by the way, I don't know if you have a copy of this, but when people ask me if I was to pick my favorite book of all time, it is the track for this the Triple Jump Encyclopedia by Bullard and Knuth. Agree or disagree with it, I don't care. There is a billion exercises in here of every idea ever even thought of in jumping, bounding, sprinting, lifting. It's all in there. I think if they've sold 100 copies on the planet, I think I bought at one time 75 of them, and I can't keep them because people always borrow them from me and I never come back. But the triple jump, I've had a theory for a long time that if I was just going to work with the team, now this would be very unpopular, is I would train. Do you notice I didn't say what team it was?
No.
I would train everybody in the beginning as triple jumpers.
Yeah. Because
I think that is the most foundational. There's something amazing about the triple jump. If there's anything, if you have an error, you just got it exposed. And you didn't even know you had an error, but you do. Yeah.
I love that. I just had a podcast with Ryan Banta, who coaches track in Missouri, was talking about his freshman sprinters. He starts them all on like the 400 and hurdles. Like that's his base to build decathletes, if you will. Triple jump isn't in every state, but I think about triple jump, putting that in there too. It's like if you can triple jump, do hurdles, and you have some speed endurance on a foundation of speed, like you're in a pretty good place. And some of the best podcasts I love all the podcasts I've done, but some of the ones that stand out to me are people who either A, do hammer, or B, have done triple jump, or both. John Garish, I think he's over in Florida, I believe has done both. And you watch the way he trains his athletes just in general, and it's all just elastic. The priority and the wisdom and the nuance of elastic energy is there. I was like, I think I'd forgotten he did. He either did triple jump or he trains it. I don't know, but I was like, this is
Snapacity.
Yes,
Snapacity is elasticity.
Yes,
but it with the idea of being able to do it over and over and over again. I want you to be able to punch your defensive lineman every single play, every single down, multiple times, and just just constantly wear them back. That's Snapacity. Hit again, hit again, hit again. Oh, that's great. When I was in college, we had a funny conversation about this. The track and field triathlon. The problem is the decathlon, now that the pole vault is all that decathlon is now, is really good pole vaulters doing 9 other events too. Our triathlon was the 400 intermediate, the hammer throw, and the pole vault.
Wow. Awesome.
And the idea on that was you take, and then, you work the points out, and, it was just a conversation on a bus ride, but I can remember that like it was yesterday, because now it's interesting that I picked the pole vault versus the triple jump, but the pole vault at the time was still, a reasonable event. It wasn't just yeah.
I love that. I wish I had access to a pole vault pit closer. I would love to get going and doing that again. But let's go with the Snapacity a little bit more, because we just have a little bit of chunk of time left, and I'd love to get more into that. And I love that you mentioned the work capacity piece too, just because I think so often when we think plyos, and again, there is that part of plyos that should be just explosive, like doing some depth jumps and things. But then the longer I've gone along, I have found there's just something like when I play basketball, and when I played basketball, that is snap and capacity. You can't play basketball for like 2 minutes and be like, all right, I'm good. Let me rest and wait till I'm fully recovered, and now I can go sprint. It's like you just have to go. And I always felt so explosive coming off of basketball. And when I stopped playing basketball or even volleyball or something, I always lost just something. And I've spent a lot of my career trying to figure out exactly what that something is. I don't think I actually need to know exactly. Like I know, and I think it's complex enough, but I think there's something to the capacity too there. Like you mentioned.
This conversation has been around a long time. I'm not a big fan of doing, like when I go to a high school program and I watch them do plyometrics, I always cringe and say, these guys are too stupid to coach, because I agree. I mean, I didn't always agree with everything. It's weird I'm exactly 20 years younger than LJ Sylvester. Our birthdays are the same. He's 37 and I'm 57. We both went to Utah State. I went to Utah State because of him. And LJ and I don't always agree on everything, but, he was doing a workshop one time and he said, I don't understand what you guys do in the off season. The off season should be this. You should make sure you keep your squat up. You probably should keep your bench press up. You should do that. And then just play basketball like 2 or 3 times a week. That'll take care of everything else you need. And I remember thinking, well, that's pretty good. If you're a bunch of discus throwers, and of course I used flag football as my off-season conditioner for my athletes. We also had this no goalie soccer league I invented, which was just hilarious. And you're right. If instead of having throwers do some kind of plyometrics, have them kick them. Well, and we also, that thing called the Swiss ball?
Oh yeah.
That's what we played soccer with.
Really? Oh, that sounds fun.
Because it was hilarious. Because they wouldn't run to save their lives, but to chase that damn thing around, they would lose their minds, man. So yeah, I think we can get a lot of this done by just having a good time. And you're right. You can put together the greatest plyometric program in the world. But, when I watch elite basketball players, they jump pretty good to me. It seems like to me, the one guy the other day jumped over LeBron. I don't think he was out the night before doing depth jumps with Pat Masdorf, who, by the way, invented depth jumps, in case anyone needs to know. It wasn't the European, no offense, our friends in the communist bloc stole depth jumps from America. Fred Wilt called it plyometrics, the American. We just, because those of us in America always think that it's, where the grass is greener in everything in sports science. It's always better somewhere else because it's not from here. The joke here in Utah, they did a huge article of me in this local paper about me and about how I have this free gym and you can come in. And the author's going, aren't you worried that your gym will be packed? I said, not a single person will respond to this article. He calls me up 3 weeks later. He goes, well, did people show up? Not a single person. Because my good friend Jesus of Nazareth told me that one time. He goes, Danny, you can't be a prophet in your own town. I said, darn it, you're right, my friend. It's true. If I put Bulgarian, blah, 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 Bulgarian plyometric secrets, Bulgarian secrets, okay, BS. Well, there's your next book, okay? It's called BS, okay? And you can put all the nonsense you want in it. But if you put Bulgarian or Soviet or whatever, it sells, even though it could be just total junk, it would be total junk. But so Snapacity then is this idea that not only am I my junior college coach was from West Germany, and he called stretch reflex shish ku. So you pull the rubber band, let it go. Shish ku. You pull the bow, you pull the arrow, you let it go. Shish ku. And it's great to have the shish ku, but in most of the sports I have, you need to be able to do it over and over and over again. So you need to build that foundation of being able to hold the plank, stay tall, all that. You need to build that stability into an engine, and then you need to be able to make that thing snap, 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 snap over and over and over again. And then as you get closer and closer to the peak, to the nationals, to whatever you got to do, that's when you just got to let it happen, which is the hardest part of working with athletes.
Yeah. What do you, I know you've talked a lot about how maybe it was one of those moments, I don't know if you were injured or not, but getting into like and I guess this isn't elastic, but even just like loaded carries, sleds, those things. There is the gait cycle,
loaded
right?
Carries.
Yeah.
See, it's funny. You nailed it, Joel. I was about to say that the reason I like loaded carries so much is that they build work capacity, but think about where it builds it. If I'm doing a suitcase carry, so do you want pounds or kilos? Let's
go kilos. We're at
okay, let's go. You got 28 kilos in a kettlebell, and I put it in your left hand, and I tell you to go for a walk, and you go walk. And then at the end of the 100 meters, you turn around and you walk back. Well, as you get fatigued on this loaded carry, so you have to fight that load that's only on one side. You want your chin, your sternum, and your zipper CSZ line to be straight. You don't want to lean into it. You want to lean back. You want to lean to the side. You want to stay tall. So as that load on one side and the length of the walk start to combine, you're fighting to hold that together. To me, that's how you build work capacity, is with loaded carries. You can probably do it. I mean, in some ways, I know, like high rep back squats has great value. And I also think, honestly, hill sprints have great value. And they're all circling around the same idea, is that we're trying to build this capacity up by doing things that are relatively safe. Odd to say that high rep squats are relatively safe, but they are, because the load tends to be lighter. Hill sprints are very safe. I've never had an injury going up a hill, and I've never had anyone I have. It's very hard. And by the way, you don't have to teach technique running up a hill.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to truly mess up hill sprints.
Yeah, if somebody's going to exaggerate where they put their arms and their hands, they'll do it a couple, but they're not going to do that for 8 rounds. They're going to simplify, and cut things down. Suitcase carries, heavy weighted bag carries, 50 to 60 kilos, 110 to 135 pounds. You're going to be asking I call it your anaconda muscles, those those muscles that make you squeeze together. They're going to make you squeeze together as you carry those loads. And that's going to, so if I can get my discus thrower to do bear hug carries where they're squeezing, and once they get tired, they're just holding on to weights to save their life and all that. And so you talk like this because, everything's squeezing down and you're doing all that second spine stuff. Some people call the ab wall the second spine. You're doing all that. And but the idea is when you throw the discus, then later, hopefully this integrates over, is that you're so strong in those anaconda muscles that you allow the radius to stay long when you throw versus, flailing away, falling away, or whatever you do. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of that archetype, it's interesting. I had a podcast with, I think his origin is obviously French, but Julien Pineau, who he talks about it as internal and external torque. And it's funny because as you just mentioned because I've heard your analogy of, do you hang on the branch, right? Or I forget what the other one is. Either your analogy, you're clinging to the branch, or I guess the functional opposite you could say maybe is like jumping or something like that, or where you're extending. And Julian had talked about, basically he talks about it as internal torque. What is the opposite of that?
You're walking through the savannah and a lion, a tiger, a leopard, whatever it is, pops in front of you. You can either run, or climb up the tree and hold on for dear life. And those are the big qualities that make you survive. These are the survival qualities. If you think you can outsprint a cheetah, good luck on that. If you can outfight a lion, good luck on that. But if you can get up that tree as fast as you can and hold on for dear life, whoever holds on the longest lives.
That was that's so cool you mentioned that, because that's part of the fun of doing this podcast is you hear some of the stories from different perspectives. And Julian had talked about, he calls it internal torque and external torque. And internal torque is muscles from the outside squeezing inwards. And and one of his big things is sandbags. And so when you squeeze a sandbag. And so I spent a lot of this winter, and talk about even compression. I wouldn't let myself really sprint it all this winter. I wanted to save that for the sunshine, which has been amazing. Compressing, it's withholding that, because otherwise I just sprint all year, and then it just kind of, you never really compress it. It's just, And so, but it's just crazy the difference in the development, being a high jumper and javelin thrower, that's so based on loading the bow behind yourself, getting your arms and the swing leg way back behind you to load up. Same thing with a javelin, holding that thing way back. And so the ratio of bringing things back to actually squeezing in front from you is so low. So doing a ton of sandbag cleans, sandbag carries, holding the sandbag and running up a hill with it. My muscular development on the front, it's crazy how much more balanced my body looks just for the long and the short of it. So I'd been ignoring that for the longest time. But even in doing that with the work capacity element, because I would do it, I've talked about this on this podcast. I wasn't all right, I'm going to do 5 sets of 15-meter sprints and I'm going to rest 3. I was I'll just keep going. I'm just going to treat this like capacity. I'm not going to put a time. I'm not going to strictly do the sets and reps. I kind of treat it like the dice roll that you've talked about. And the result was phenomenal. And almost thinking, that almost lives outside of the poke or the prod, where it's just nervous system. And it's interesting. I've actually kind of thought in some ways for relative strength stuff, like sprinting and jumping, you almost could switch the P's. It's almost like if it's just body weight, it's you have the initial, my isometric, my basic body weight, and then because if you put the poke before the snap ability in a sprinter or a jumper, you can end up imbalancing the system. I mean, I think you should do it all, but
to me, so this is where the you alone approach comes. So I think you always need to do all three.
Yeah.
However, and this is one of the things that so Southern California, Texas, and Florida, they often are great sprint states. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But one of the things you'll notice about the throwing cores down there, very often they have very good Decembers and Januaries because they throw. I remember my senior year at Utah State University, we had storms so heavy the week before conference. I mean, I couldn't even get down to the track one day, okay? I couldn't even get to practice. It was that bad. The week of our conference meet. Well, I go down to San Jose, and every single thrower I compete against basically threw either, about where they normally threw or a little less. And I popped a 10-foot personal record, 3-meter personal record. And everyone's like, well, how'd you do it? I was like, well, I mean, that thing, that yellow thing in the sky, I was scared of it. And by the way, it was hilarious because Utah State's track team was absolutely lily white on day one and absolutely bright red on day two. None of us had any, we were all sunburned. But the idea is that we got compressed, boom, and we expanded at the conference meet. We had a 6-man team, and I think we took 4th at conference. We just didn't have the numbers back then. So, but I think you're exactly right. One of the jobs of a good coach then is, so you watch TV and you look at these 100-meter guys, and they're all got ripped abs and big thighs and broad shoulders. So you decide to bodybuild all year long to make them look like that. They're not going to be very fast. Mm-hmm. But if you teach them to be tight and you teach them to, you spend the winter months, training them like triple jumpers and doing all these other things. And some injuries show up. So we get them in the weight room to build that injury up. Triple jump, weight lift, triple jump, weight lift, bound weight lift. And all of a sudden we go outdoors. Now we got ourselves a true sprinter. So you're right. I know a lot of people ripped on Barry Ross, but I liked his insights as a sprint coach. And I know, do we like or hate Barry Ross this week in your field, in your area?
Funny enough, I think no one's really talked about it. I think it's funny because I remember when it was a big debate, but I think the last decade, I think people on Twitter have found 10,000 other things to debate and rip at in that time. I think it's been a little forgotten. So I was even trying to remember. I just remember it was like sumo deadlifts and sprint, or just sumo deadlifts and plyos. So it was my big remembrance of him. And then you mentioned the book too about walking, the walking for conditioning as well. I remember reading that.
Oh, that was wonderful. Yeah. And so, I think, for me, I look at Barry Ross and I look at the way we've been talking. Barry Ross pretty much nailed it. Of course, he was Southern California. He had some different things he had some different advantages with the weather and facilities. So if you were to do a minimalist approach with what we're talking about, you're looking at Barry Ross. You look at Charlie Francis. What was his big thing? If you hit any kind of personal record, you were done for the day. Mm-hmm. Any lap pull down personal record, bye-bye, see you tomorrow.
Yeah. That'd be compressing, right? You're just, every time you do that, you're compressing by terminology.
And then you come up with some rules that help you long-term as a coach. Okay, here's the secret. Here's the secret to being great. Well, in the throws, it's almost always a decade. 8 years, a decade. Here's what you need to do. I can tell you on day one what you need to do as a discus thrower. It's stretch 1, 2, 3, and then in 3, the throwing position. It's A, B, C. And I don't worry about it, gentle listener. Just my point is, I can teach you everything you need to know about to be an elite discus thrower on day one. It's going to take you a decade of us pointing, prodding, snapping to figure what I said on day one. And it's funny because on day 6,912, I'm going to probably say something. You're going to go, "Oh, you told me that the first time I met you." Right. It was true then. It's true now. Yeah. That's why another reason I love track and field so much. It's a pretty simple sport, by the way, and that's why track and field is dying. Is it's a pretty simple sport. You can't hack your way to superior performance.
Simple, trackable outputs.
Yeah, you can't buy your way into an outstanding throw or jump.
Yeah,
Mom can't send you to a camp or hire
That always tells the tale. One of the things I know we're running out of time here, that one of the things I always look at with coaching, like if I'm watching a coaching talk, and maybe this is me being overly judgmental, but if it's track, like that's the beautiful thing. You hop on TFers or athletic.net is year to year, how did your athletes do? And obviously there's variances and different things that happen and pop up, but like, I think compared to any other facet of the industry, this is the most transparent and easy to read and see thing where all results are laid bare. And it is, at the end of the day, the most simple thing. Simple, but not easy. Simple, but not easy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was with the BYU coach. So my coach, Ralph Mon, and his dad, Clarence Robinson, both retired the same year in 1988. And I can remember I would listen to both of those. This is 1988. This is a while. That's 35 years ago. And I would, when at track meets, when I was a young coach, and even as when I was still, I threw until 2010, so I have to be, but I would listen to these two guys talk, And their vision of track and field was just so basic. I mean, you probably could teach the fundamentals of track and field to kindergartner, well, first graders for sure.
Yeah.
And then the problem is, like you just said, and then we can see how good you are. It's like, where that progression goes, and that's why track and field's dying, is because if you tell me that your son runs a 17-second 100 meters, I know that your son is not fast. He might be a fine young man, but he's not a sprinter. And you can't buy your way. You might be able to get him to 16 seconds, spending a lot of money. And if you give him all kinds of inappropriate things that are banned by the sport, you might get him to 15 seconds, but he still sucks. Sucks. He's not good at all. He's not good. And that is the hardest part of track and field.
Yeah.
And the fun thing is, like you said, if you can get that high jumper to figure out, like you said, that preloading, when they turn themselves into that, that weird shape that if you stop it and look at it, it looks just like a bow and arrow. If you look at it, and there's that moment in the shot put and the height, we all look like pole vaulters. There's that moment where there's the pole and we're driving into it, it's bow and arrow. And if I can get you to do that almost universally, I get you better in track and field. It's good stuff.
Yeah. And
we didn't get to what we wanted to cover today. So you're going to call me. We're going to make another one. Okay. So we can talk about easy strength next time.
Oh, yeah. Lots and lots of questions for that one. Yeah. Sadly, we're out of time. But, some of the best shows are where we only get through one or two questions. So I had a great time chatting with you today, Dan. It was awesome. And yeah, we'll cover the rest next time. And I'll give you more time to go through the Omni-Book, the Easy Strength Omni-Book as well. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks. And I gotta go coach. So we'll talk soon. Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Bye. That finishes another episode. Thanks for being here. If you want to check out the Easy Strength Omni-Book that Dan just finished, you can head to danjohnuniversity.com. I've read the book. It's awesome. I'd absolutely recommend it. And I hope you get a chance to check it out. We'll see you all next week.